Hello, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, what should be done to stop violence from the armed group Boko Haram? We'll look at how Nigeria is approaching its top security threat. As always, our digital producer Malika Bilal is here keeping an eye on all of your comments and Twitter and Facebook comments as well. Malika, we're talking about Boko Haram today. This was a subject that was suggested by our Nigerian community, and they have not stopped tweeting me since yesterday. Look at the bags under my eyes, all night, all day long. What are they saying?
And they're still tweeting, and I'm looking at TweetDeck and seeing the tweets. Now, we've always had a very active community following in Nigeria, and so of course today we're getting lots of tweets, especially from the north, where people are giving us a daily glimpse into what life is like. There's a tweet from Fati who says, "I live in Maiduguri. It's horrific. I've seen dead bodies, burnt houses, plenty of orphans, widows, dead economy. Fear is rampant." And one more from Gambo who says, "You can imagine having a lecture or studying and suddenly all you hear is a bomb blast and gunshots. That was what I went through." Now, for those of you at home, whether you're in Nigeria or outside anywhere else, we want you to join the conversation by using the hashtag AJStream.
I have to say, Malika, one of the concerns from the tweets that were coming through to me and to you and to at AJStream was that the North has to be represented. We want to make sure we get the Northern voice in. So as well as you bringing all that Northern feedback to us, I'm going to make you an honorary Northern Nigerian. Are you good with that?
I'm honored, yes.
Yes, excellent, my sister. So, also in the studio, you can already see him there, Omoyele Shorore. He is an activist, a Nigerian activist, and a citizen journalist with Sahara Reporters. That's a multimedia Nigerian news site. Shorore, we're looking forward to your take, particularly on Boko Haram. Also looking forward to hearing from all of you watching, and as you know, this is a program that's driven by your participation. So if you've got an idea for a future show, share it on our Facebook wall. I'm just going to scroll down here to see what you're sending in right now. All you need to do is go to facebook.com/AJStream. It's just one way for you to be in the stream.
Hello, my name is Nicholas Pert. I am the after-school facilitator for the Brotherhood Sister Soul. I am passionate about my community, and I am in the stream.
Is Nigeria any closer to solving its issues with Boko Haram? Now, since the armed group's formation more than a decade ago, thousands of civilians in the country's north have been killed in bombings and attacks. The group says that their aim is to turn Nigeria into an Islamic state. But is the Nigerian government's response to fighting domestic terrorism also part of the problem? And apart from religion, what else is motivating Boko Haram to continue its violent campaigns? So here to discuss these issues with us is Professor Wole Soyinka, the prolific Nigerian writer and 1986 Nobel Prize laureate for literature. Professor Soyinka has also been an outspoken critic of Boko Haram. He joins us from London. In Abuja, we have Dr. Doyin Okupe. He is the Senior Special Assistant on Public Affairs to President Goodluck Jonathan. Also in Abuja, Al Jazeera's West Africa correspondent Yvonne Dege. She's been covering Boko Haram in Nigeria since 2009 and recently gained exclusive interviews with Boko Haram members captured by the Nigerian military. Professor, Dr. Yvonne, welcome to you all. Let's start with the latest news from the region with Shorore. I've been on your website, Sahara Reporters, and of course the first story that popped out to me here, Boko Haram militants hit police and army formations. What's the latest you've got on this? Is this typical? We're getting a lot of stories every day.
As a matter of fact, this one is not typical. This is one of the most successful attacks by Boko Haram on military formations in a town called Bama, close, not too far from Maiduguri. Before I got into the studio, a whole prison had been burnt down and 150 prisoners released by Boko Haram today. They attacked the office of the DPO, they attacked the police barrack and an army barrack as well. As far as I know, we do not even know the number of casualties both on the civilian and military side as we speak. This is most likely one of the highest casualties from Boko Haram attacking in one day on Bama.
So typically, if you're looking at stories from Maiduguri, from the north where Boko Haram operates, how often will you see stories like this?
We rely on citizens, we rely on people who witness these things, and they're using modern technology, especially mobile telephony, to get information to us. So they send us pictures, they send us text, and we process in New York and release to the world, and this has been known to be very, very accurate. And sometimes when the military is trying to cover things up, it is this kind of reporting that allows the public or the world to know what exactly is happening. And we report both, what the military does and the atrocities also committed by Boko Haram. It's to the extent that at the time they actually threatened us because of our reporting.
Yvonne, you've been in Maiduguri in North Nigeria quite recently in the last few days. I really want you to give us a sense of how the people are reacting to this onslaught of violence day after day.
Well, Femi, just imagine a situation where your day-to-day life suddenly comes to a halt. All the simple things, taking your kids to school, going to the market, become a huge problem. When you step outside your front door, within a matter of meters, you might find a police checkpoint, a military checkpoint. In the middle of the day, you might hear loud explosions or gunfire. People, particularly in Borno State, which has been at the epicenter of the violence, the capital known as Maiduguri, people's lives have really been turned upside down. Many communities have actually left the state. Many people do live in fear of being attacked by Boko Haram or being caught in the crossfire between Boko Haram fighters and the Joint Military Task Force, who have basically been trying to put an end to the group's acts of terrorism, as many people feel that they are.
One of the things that I'm asking myself as I'm watching your coverage on Al Jazeera is, why is Boko Haram actually doing this? What is their motivation? And you actually got a chance to speak to some prisoners. How did you even get that access? Because I want to play a little clip of one of your recent reports, but just set the scene. How did you get even to speak to this group?
Well, we'd actually gone to the Borno State Command military headquarters to interview Lieutenant Colonel Sagir Musa. And whilst we were conducting this interview, we had discussed the possibility of having access to those who had confessed to being a part of the group, those who were prepared to go on camera. And fortunately, he was able to arrange that for us. And we were able to speak to 3 different men who had been effectively prisoners in the JTF command for some time, who basically told us why they were part of the group. We met a spiritual leader who said that he believed in Sharia law being spread throughout Nigeria, right, a strict form of Islamic law, for example. And then we met a sub-commander who had been involved in criminal activities where people had actually died.
So let me actually play that, because you actually interview them, and I really think it's important that the people at home hear what they say in their own words. So have a listen to this.
These men have confessed to being members of Boko Haram. We were granted access to them by the military in Maiduguri, Borno State. Mohammed Ibrahim says he's a fighter. Adam Abubakar says he's a commander in the group, and Ibrahim Mohammed says he's one of the group's spiritual leaders. There were no preconditions given to us to interview them. Mohammed has been in detention since August.
They arrested me because I'm a teacher in Boko Haram. Yes, my belief is that that should be Islamic law, and we have chosen to take up arms against people who do not want Sharia.
Mohammed Ibrahim says he's been a member of Boko Haram since the group started. Why do you support the killing of innocent civilians, innocent Nigerians?
Killing like this happen by mistake. If, for example, somebody innocent is passing by when we are fighting, if he dies, he is innocent. We don't worry at all. We are forgiven by God.
Dr. Okupe, in Abuja, there's a little bit of a gap between when I ask a question and when you hear it, so do bear with us at home. But how do you deal with a group that's okay about killing civilians because they believe that God will forgive them? What's your strategy to tackle them?
Well, like in every insurgency, there are various approaches. One is to show one is to meet up with whatever firepower that they come up with, but also you have to also combine that. You have to combine that with some level of education of the society where the insurgency is based, and also be prepared for dialogue, and if possible to meet up with some of the conditionalities that the insurgents have brought up. But talking seriously, Femi, it's a very difficult, very difficult situation. People who are ideologically committed, to fighting for their religion. You had the gentleman saying that he wants a Sharia, he wants Sharia law to be applicable in Nigeria and all that. These are very dangerous and very difficult things for government to handle. But this administration of President Goodluck Jonathan regarded at the beginning that the Boko Haram elements are Nigerians and that we have to deal with them with limited force.
Okay, Dr. Kube,
especially because they operate within civilian conclaves.
Dr. Kube, hold on for a minute, because I want to just bring in the community, Malika, because obviously they have a lot to say.
And they're streaming in. They're giving us these personal first-hand accounts of what it's like to live in the north. Abu Bakr says, I've lost not one, but 5 of my family members from Boko Haram in Nigeria, but the government doesn't want to end it. Another from Mai who says, I'm in Maiduguri. My mom used to call me every 30 to 40 minutes to see if I'm okay, alive. And one more from Tim Topa. He says, Boko Haram took away our freedom of worship. They continued bombings in many churches and made us wary of Sunday services. And that leads really well into this video comment we received from a father of a church in Maiduguri who talks about things getting worse.
The city is gradually becoming a shadow of itself. Many people have left besides those who died. For example, today, about 9 of us were ready to travel, but we could not because in one of the cities nearby, about 40 miles from here, there was an attack on the military, and for the whole night, I understand, there was gunfire between the two groups, the military and the Boko Haram people. And this morning, the town is completely cut off. Nobody could go in, nobody could come out from the place. And that meant those who wanted to travel could not travel. So it is difficult to predict life here.
Difficult to predict life.
Let me just go over to London to Professor Soyinka. Professor Soyinka, you're a very well-known writer and a commentator on Nigerian affairs. This seems to be very peculiarly involved in Nigeria, a sort of a homegrown terrorist group. How do you make sense of it in the way that Nigeria is developing right now?
Let me begin by saying that part of the problem in Nigeria is that people are looking at this as a short-term phenomenon that can be tackled with short-term solutions. And also looking at what's happening in Nigeria, this eruption, as a localized thing. Yes, of course, Boko Haram is a local movement, but it is part of an international disease. And even when the members of Boko Haram claim that they're fighting for their religion, we have the knowledge and the pronouncements of other Muslims that they are not true Muslims and that what they're doing is not approved by the Islamic religion, by any teaching in Islamic religion. And so we must go back to the very beginning of their indoctrination, the schools, the madrasas. We've spoken a lot about military responses, and I was very happy to hear somebody say, I think he was a military officer, saying that the military solution is not the only one. It's one of the many approaches which are absolutely essential, because you're dealing with people who I sometimes suspect are psychiatric cases. Sometimes conduct themselves in ways that makes one question what actually is the definition of a human being. When you encounter people who say they're fighting for a cause and they waylay school children, school pupils, tie their hands behind their backs and cut their throats meticulously, and the throats of their teachers, you begin to wonder whether you are dealing with human beings or with truly sick individuals. And yet at the same time, you know that they are part of a well-structured, very unscrupulous, very determined international phenomenon. So we have to go back to where these men are indoctrinated and do something about that very basis of the malformation of their minds.
Well, Professor Soyinka, could it also be, you know, in hand with the indoctrination, members of our community are asking if this has to do with poverty and the situations that they're coming from and living in. Nafiu says, widespread injustice, pent-up frustration, unprecedented levels of joblessness are the forces behind this insurgency. Oscar says this is a result of underutilization of resources by the northern ruling elite, making a good ground for this kind of ideology. Do you agree with that?
So, sorry, you must excuse me if I don't answer your question precisely. That's because I only partially hear it. I have a technological problem here. But you're asking, how do we handle this within Nigeria? Was that your question? Was that the thrust of your question?
Well, the question, though, is does poverty play a root? Is that a role in this?
The ordinary citizen, or Wole Soyinka, or the government?
Well, the question is directed to you, Professor.
Well, first of all, I'm on record as having said that Nigeria is in a war situation. The entire population of Nigeria must consider itself as being on a war situation. And that means that the Boko Haram phenomenon should not be regarded as being limited to the northern region alone, or to Borno or Maiduguri or Yobe. No, it is something that affects the entirety of the nation, because these are people who have declared categorically that they will be satisfied with nothing less than not just the Islamization of Nigeria, of the people, but Islamization in their own very narrow, distorted, and vicious mode.
So,
and they will not be satisfied. Sorry.
Professor Soyinka, so that's one angle, which is the religious angle. But another angle is, and I'm hearing it reported a lot, was about military maybe involvement, corruption, which tends to be the issue for a lot of problems that happen in Nigeria. Oh, it's corruption. But Shore, tell me about what you've been finding out on the ground in terms of your reporting about maybe there being some military involvement, police involvement, corruption. Where does that play a part?
Well, it's a little bit of everything, and I've said it before, and I will say it again, that is a cocktail of how Nigeria has been run in the last 40 years. I say it, and I'll repeat it here today, that so many of the things that Boko Haram does in Nigeria and gets away with, it's actually a small law enforcement issue. But because the government of Nigeria has not been running itself well, and the law enforcement agencies have been involved in corruption over the years, they've destroyed the agency of security, they have destroyed the country, they've dehumanized its people. You have every little problem in Nigeria escalates into a big thing. When we didn't have Boko Haram, we had the Niger Delta militants. As a matter of fact, a guy named Dokubu Asari is threatening as we speak that if Jonathan president does not become the president in 2015, they will render Nigeria ungovernable. Kidnappers in the eastern part of Nigeria has made it even impossible for people to bury their dead. So Nigeria is badly run. Corruption has ruined Nigeria. It has dehumanized its people. And these leaders are seen as people who don't love their people. They don't love the country. And that's why you see that Dr. Okukwe, when he was speaking, didn't even know where this is coming from. He said they are using force, they are using dialogue. But as we speak today, even the amnesty that they organized has failed, because the army and elements in the military do not want amnesty to succeed, because this is where they make their corruption money from. The military, JTF in the Niger Delta, are involved directly in some form of corruption in what they call oil bunkering. They love this. They love Nigeria the way it is broken. And that is why citizens should gather together and face up to our reality. We have a bad leadership in place that can't get anything done.
Dr. Kupe?
I would like to make a distinction. How do you obtain foot soldiers? The nation, the government, is responsible for the proliferation, the availability of foot soldiers. And this is due to what you have mentioned: corruption, mammoth corruption, misgovernance, alienation, the level of unemployment, the distinct feeling of youth impressionable youth of not being part of the entire polity. This is what creates, this is what makes it possible to have an army of available foot soldiers who are then open to indoctrination. Now, having said that and emphasized that and admitted that, we still have to deal with the ideology that makes it possible, as I said, for them to decimate innocent people, to go into a marketplace and throw their homemade devices there, machine gun Okada riders, waylay school pupils coming from their examinations, as happened recently, tie their hands behind their back and slit their throats. They are not responsible for misgovernance. Now, what is it? What other factor is it that makes it possible for human beings to behave in a way in which we look for a new definition of humanity? So let's take the corruption for granted. Let's take the alienation, let's take the mismanagement, let's take even the corrupt politics, because many of those who are there are not really, you know, they got there by violence.
Professor
and they'll set an example of violence to others.
Professor Shoyinka,
So
I really want to get...
is there?
You know I'm going to hell for interrupting Professor Shoyinka because I took a literature degree. I am going to hell for that. But Malika.
Well, a lot of the word corruption has come up a lot. And so, of course, I want Dr. Doyen to address it, but also with these tweets. TJ writes, the government's response has been all shades of awful. Poor intelligence and strategy, corruption and lack of political will makes it worse for the locals. But then on the other hand, we have this tweet from John who says, unfortunately, those who oppose the government's approach offer no practical and realistic alternatives beyond just criticizing the government and the JTF, the Joint Task Force. Dr. Doyen, how do you respond to that?
Thank you very much. Sometimes one cannot but be ashamed about how certain pseudo-elites of Nigeria, like Showore and co., castigate their own country and the leadership of their own country. You know, being tucked away, far away in the United States, in the comfort zone, it is a lot easier to just condemn, you know, various governments and various administrations in your own country. Now, I remember very well, there was a time in Ghana where everything went down to, you know, to the most basic thing. You know, poverty became ravaging and life became very difficult to live, to the extent that, you know, people became displaced and they were moving away from their homes in Ghana. They flooded all the West African coast, especially Nigeria. What I'm trying to say is that in spite of ravaging poverty, Ghanaians did not take up arms against their people, against their country. I agree that there's a lot of youthful unemployment, but that itself cannot explain the degree of devastation that Nigeria is facing from Boko Haram. You know, people cannot pretend to, not to recognize the influence of a new phenomenon that is going on in the world. It's a global thing. The Al-Qaeda thing, the Islamist fundamentalism that is spreading like a wave around the Islamic states, you know, and in places where Islam is very strong, cannot be underestimated.
Okay,
you know, these
Dr.
people
Doyen,
are ideological.
Dr. Doyen, I have to ask you one thing to do. When that is just, give us one sentence to finish up so that you can have the last word for the government before we wrap up and then go to the post show. So if you had to just sum up your challenge in a sentence, just a sentence.
Yeah. Well, you know, we have a major problem in Nigeria with this insurgency, but the federal government of Nigeria is doing its utmost best to sort it out. And I believe that the Nigerian military has the Nigerian military and the security agencies have the capability to resolve this issues. But because it's an internal insurgency, there's a need to have limited attack.
Thank you so much. Yeah. We will continue in the post show. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but we have to move on. On Wednesday's program, we're taking a look at how politicians running in Pakistan's upcoming election are trying to get the youth vote. Now, would you vote for a politician if they gave you a laptop, money, or friended you on Facebook? Tweet us your thoughts on that. You'll see us online. Hello again, this is the Stream's online post show. We're talking about Boko Haram, the armed group that's based in Nigeria, and ways the government could reach a solution to end violence that's mostly been affecting the northern part of the country. So let's get back to that conversation. Dr. Doan, I apologise, I asked you for a one-sentence. I should have realised that I should never ask for a Nigerian to give me a one-sentence summary. I know that, I'm a Nigerian. So Dr. Doan, get back to that idea
that's fine.
That you wanted to, in terms of just leaving the audience with something where they really want to know what the Nigerian government is going to do about Boko Haram. The group has been around for 13 years. What are you going to do?
Well, you know, basically, you know, we're in a situation now where the northern elites, the traditional rulers, and you know, the opinion leaders in the north, you know, came and spoke very extensively with the Mr. President, and seriously demanded and requested and pleaded for, you know, some intervention in the form of the willingness of government to grant amnesty to Boko Haram. You know, and this is the phase in which we are. Guarantees have been given that, you know, the northern leaders and the northern elites will be able to extract a dialogue mode from the Boko Haram, and the government is, the government has put up a committee to oversee this in conjunction with the leadership of the entire north. Now, it is hoped that this will produce results. But, you know, the resolve of government to end Boko Haram and the devastating effects, you know, in the areas where it is prevalent is totally unshaken. And the government is, you know, retains the capability and, you know, the wherewithal to stop this dastardly act.
Yvonne, I want your thoughts on this amnesty and what you've heard from people while reporting. John tweets in, amnesty to Boko Haram is legitimizing terrorism. The basis for their actions is unjustified. We can also learn from its failure in the Niger Delta. There's another tweet saying amnesty should be granted with conditions attached. Now, I know that you recently wrote a blog post on covering mayhem in Nigerians' Baga in the north. I've pulled it up on my screen here. So what have you heard from people, you know, after attacks like that, like the one in Baga? Do people want amnesty? Is that the way forward?
Well, Malika, it seems like the amnesty is sort of running into trouble before it's even gotten off the ground, because obviously the attacks that we saw in Baga came after the announcement of this amnesty. What we're also seeing is, you know, you could say a sort of splintering within Boko Haram. On the one hand, you have Abubakar Shekau, who's kind of the public face of Boko Haram. He's the known leader. He's the guy that posts videos on YouTube, basically dismissing the amnesty, saying that it's the Nigerian government that should be asking for forgiveness from Nigerians. But then you have the government coming out saying that, you know, 2 or 3 representatives of Boko Haram are in dialogue with them. So it's very, very unclear now as to where this amnesty is going, whether it will be a success. There's been all sorts of controversy about some of the members of the amnesty committee actually dropping out. But I think ultimately what Nigerians want across the board is a solution. And, you know, amnesty has worked in dealing with other crises in other parts of Nigeria over the years. So I think that Nigerians are basically prepared to give amnesty a go and hope that it works. But like I say, right now it seems to be running into difficulty.
Sure, Ray.
Yes. I just want to say briefly that to Dr. Okukwe that, you know, I don't like when they make comparison between Nigeria and other countries that are broken. They never make comparison between Nigeria and other countries that are working. Because Ghana did not make $500 billion from oil by the time it had poverty. Ghana did not have the kind of population that Nigeria had. It didn't have the kind of land space, you know, the rivers, the seas, and, you know, the very, very, very progressive, hardworking people that Nigeria had when Ghana went through all of that. We are saying once again that it is very convenient to accuse those of us who are trying to make Nigeria work that we're ensconced somewhere abroad. I mean, Dr. Doyo Okukwe forgot that when the military was ravaging the land, we were student leaders who were fighting on the ground. When the likes of Dr. Doyo Okukwe were all around doing deals, you know, with the military leaders and selling away Nigeria. I reported, and that's part of the problem, I reported on Doyo Okukwe himself, Dr. Doyo Okukwe, having been involved in corruption. And that's why Nigeria is the way it is today, because he was detained for several months in corruption. See where he is. He's speaking on behalf of Nigeria.
Dr. Okukwe, I hear you laughing. I see you laughing. Jump in just very briefly.
Because, you know, the guy that is talking to you is a huge joke. You know, he's a liar. You know, a man without any reputation. You know, people who collect money and just say anything, destroy people. You see, he's talking about corruption about me. You know, there's never been charges of corruption against
you anywhere. Were detained for corruption by the EFCC.
I mean, this is what they do. They just, you know, can you please just shut up? This is what you guys do. You know, you just disparage people and, you know, and just mess people up. Just because you have an online media, you know, that does not give you right to, you know, to destroy people's personalities and integrities.
So, Dr. Coupe, Dr. Coupe, what has this got to do with Boko Haram?
You know what I said. What I said about.
What has this got to do with Boko Haram? What has this got to do with the issue with Boko Haram? This 2 and 4 that you're doing?
You should have answered where that. Yeah. The truth of the matter, what I said about Ghana was that Ghana went through a very hard time. And in that time, the people, the poor people, did not take up arms against their people. They did not become insurgents. They did not start to kill anybody. You know, that this Boko Haram, you know, that we are having right now in the country are people who are ideologically motivated. You know, they are motivated by their religion. And it's not just in Nigeria.
Dr. Coupe, I asked you to do this before, and I'm going to ask you to do this again. I'm going to ask you to just sum up in one sentence, if you could.
Yeah, the sentence, you know, the only one sentence I can make right now is that Nigerians should not despair. You know, government is doing its best, and the government will continue to do, you know, what it needs to do to ensure that it overcomes this menace. And by God's grace, we will overcome it in due course. Thank you.
Nigerians should not despair. That's a good note to leave it on. I have a feeling that not all of our guests are happy with that answer. This is not going to end here. This is a discussion. You get a sense of the heat in the discussion. Now, before we go, Malika has a look at some of the other stories the stream is actually following.
Who poisoned Zhu Ling? That's the question buzzing on the Chinese microblogging site Sina Weibo, where users have revived a controversial cold case of a poisoned university student. In 1995, Zhu was poisoned twice with thallium, a lethal substance which left her paralyzed. The primary suspect in the case, as reported in this video shared widely online, was Zhu's roommate, who was never charged and later moved to the U.S. Renewed interest in the case surfaced online after another university poisoning scandal was reported in April. Netizens called for the case to be reopened, but say they have been met by government censorship. Wu Fei tweets, "The name Zhu Ling is now censored on Weibo." Weibo users are now playing detective to bring the alleged culprit to justice. 130,000 people have signed a White House petition calling for the investigation and deportation of Zhu's roommate. Our next lead comes from London, where 50 countries and international groups are meeting to discuss the future of Somalia. The country's new president, Hassan Sheikh Mohammed, opened the conference on a promising note, echoed by Farhiya, who tweeted, "Feeling very optimistic about Somalia. Things are going in the right direction." The mood outside the conference was quite the opposite. Hoa Citizen tweets, "Somalia conference isn't going well. Key stakeholders are missing and a growing crowd of protesters is outside the building." Somalis gathered to protest the exclusion of Somalia's autonomous regions, Jubaland, Puntland, and Somaliland. Are you following the Somalia conference? Share your thoughts with us using the hashtag AJStream. Femi?
Malika, I'm just on my laptop right now. The control room, you can have a look at my laptop. I'm looking at the response that we've got from this conversation. I have a feeling that all of us are going to be tweeted to death over the next couple of hours. Thank you so much for joining in the conversation. We had Omoyole Sowore of Sahara Reporters, Professor Wole Soyinka, he is the famous writer and Nobel laureate, Dr. Dorian Coupe, Senior Special Assistant to President Goodluck Jonathan in the hot seat for the Nigerian government, and Yvonne Dege, the Al Jazeera correspondent for West Africa. Now, I don't do this very often, but I should sign off saying my name in a Yoruba accent.
Go for it.
Okay, let me just tell you first of all what's on tomorrow's program. We'll be looking at how politicians running in Pakistan's upcoming election are trying to get the youth vote. You've been watching the stream. My name is Femi Oke. You can see us online. Thank you.